Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in this wonderful world of ours. Today we're going to be talking to two super people representing two super companies that work together a lot. We're going to be talking about with Keith Bromley of Ixia. Now is going to be part of Keysight Technologies. Uh, I've known Keith since the Anui days. And then we're talking to Mr. Jacobs. Now, Mr. Jacobs and I, uh, John, JJ, and I wrote an article together I guess about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. And he's with Fortinet, which is another top quality vendor. And what got me involved with these two is that the guys at Fortinet use the Anui tools to emulate and test their devices and fix them up so that when a customer got it, it did exactly what the customer needed. It wasn't a generic solution. So this is a great example of two big companies working together to solve complex problems for customers. And then, of course, today Denny's back, and Denny's our host as usual. So good morning and God bless all.
Good
Thank you,
morning.
Tim. Thank you, Tim. And again, I was told that this is the last of a series of presentation on visibility architecture. So all I can say is that it's probably the beginning of another series, right, Keith?
Hey, sounds good to me. But yeah, we've had like 4 of these sessions on what is a visibility architecture, what can it do for me, and so we're wrapping it up today.
Good, good. And we do it today by talking about security, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, security's top of mind for everybody. But when you look at that, a lot of people just think about maybe I need to deploy a tool or a new architecture. Tool, same thing, right? But what about the underlying infrastructure and the visibility? Is the tool getting everything it needs to see? So we're going to talk some about that today.
And why don't you introduce our special guest today, John? Our special guest today, Mr. John Jacobs.
Yeah, sure. Well, no introduction. How about I introduce myself? So
okay, sounds good.
So I've been with Fortinet for a number of years. Like Tim and I actually discovered, we've worked together in the past. Paths have crossed, and glad to be here. So we focus obviously at Fortinet at network security and application security throughout the stack, and really visibility is a key to that. So I think a perfect synergy and marriage.
Yeah.
And visibility is crucial to security. So
by the way, I really liked the part before the show. Tim and you were talking, for about 3 minutes, and then Tim said, "Hey, by the way, this guy named John Jacobs at your company? I know him forever." And then John said, "Well, I am John Jacobs."
Hey, most people start singing the song about my name, so I'm glad Tim didn't.
So what from a tool vendor? What do you see? What exactly does visibility do for you? Or put it more simply, what does Keith's product do for you?
Yeah, and I actually think there's a couple vectors. And number one, I think traditionally it was just the ability to take a capture. I think in legacy terms, we saw offline tools more prevalent. Something like an IDS or intrusion detection, something along those, or sort of a historical packet recording, things of that nature. Those are still relevant, but what we've seen, the trend and the shift now is just due to the speed of which breaches are happening, that the visibility is allowing us, as the networks have grown, the ability to segment out traffic and actually use something like a packet broker or a sniffer tap, something along those lines, to either redirect for questionable traffic, or simply take and copy traffic for analytics, real time, whether that's sandboxing or antivirus signature applications, something of those. So kind of a couple different approaches, but the trend we're really seeing now is real time redirection for analytics and potentially even application or explosion of applications and to determine advanced threats.
So once upon a time, having a hub would do that, right? And that's been a while. And so as network get complicated, what are the expectations from a tool vendor on what is now called a packet broker? What does it have to do?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. Number one is there has to be collaboration. So there has to be the ability into and out of the tool broker, if you want to call it, or the packet broker, excuse me, from the tools on the network, to be able to take intelligent feeds, to be able to, there's a pretty common concept now we hear is called elephant flow. So people will redirect very large flows to say, you know what, this is a media stream. We're not concerned so much about scanning that particular media stream, but we want to be able to look at the rest of the traffic. So there's that two-way communication and then the feedback mechanism. So we call that the fabric, the Fortinet fabric, not to get into the product pitch, but that idea is just so that we can have a synergy and just an understood API between the two systems.
Now, in the last few episodes, we actually had opportunity to talk to different kinds of two partners, but today we specifically want to talk about security, and my understanding is that the security has a lot to do with authenticity, right? If you can't rely on the evidence, you can never build the case, right? So it's just so from your standpoint, in addition to just all the features like delivering the packets, the sort of what we have been calling the chain of evidence is important to you, right?
It is. I think that's crucial to be able to a lot of the hacks we've seen now are becoming more and more complex, and so to be able to see that chain of evidence, to be able to see an entry point, perhaps some sort of propagation points along and throughout the networks, that's been a pretty crucial thing to understand, and to look to real-time on the wire platforms, such as ones like Ixia, but to be able to say we can have something that's there in real time passing traffic that has that sort of analytics history, or that that history in the data or in the transaction.
Hey, and there was a couple other things I wanted to bring up too on this subject. So about the visibility architecture enabling the security tools like these great Fortinet tools, there's two other aspects. So one of them is getting the proper access using a bypass switch. So one of the things is, instead of placing like an IPS directly in the flow of traffic, you can place a bypass switch in there that gives you failover protection, so that then if you want to take your IPS or your other security tools offline, or you want to do some software upgrades, anything like that, you can actually use the bypass switch to switch over and allow the upgrades to happen, or to do actual tool replacement. So that's another component of your visibility architecture. And then one of the other great things we can do with like Fortinet, these packet brokers, is that you could actually put multiple tools, IPSs, inline, and you can use the packet broker to do load balancing across multiple tools. This gives you, I wouldn't say like a poor man's high availability, but it gives you the ability to place traffic across multiple tools. If one goes down, the other two or three can stay up and running, and you're still processing traffic. And if you do the dimensioning properly, you can come up with an N+1 or all the way up to N+N, but you can get this survivability, reliability that you don't have by just having one tool or doing very complex high availability load balancing between the two. The packet broker can take care of that for you pretty quick and simply. And then there can be heartbeat messaging between the packet broker and the tool, and the bypass switch and the packet broker, so that you get this, I wouldn't say completely seamless, but very automated, very quick failover scenarios that'll go back and forth between the different tools and the packet broker. So you literally can keep this high availability going on in your network that you might not have been able to do otherwise, or much more costly.
Yeah, I always tell people that networks don't go down by themselves. It's usually because somebody did something that wasn't the brightest thing in the world. And also I tell people that networks were not designed for people to go out and play music and have live active screensavers and all this weird stuff. Networks were designed to do business. And the uniqueness is that with Fortinet and you guys, we can focus on what the business necessity is for the network, and get rid of a lot of the rubble that actually causes problems. I mean, we've seen since I started, of course, well, I started back in Morse code days, but in the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen that the number of breaches have actually come from inside the network. And most of the time, I don't like that term, but we call it the stupid user syndrome, okay? Uh, or the lazy user syndrome, not looking at the right thing. But it's amazing what we're seeing now. And so that's a unique thing with Fortinet using packet brokers with, Ixia, uh, and using a diversity of tools. I mean, I'm wearing my Wireshark shirt. I mean, come on. Everybody uses Wireshark, but Wireshark can't swallow, 15 lines of 10 gig. Okay.
No.
Uh, but if we feed it the right information, we can do, you know, baselining on one connection. We can do, application focused stuff. We can look at users, IP spreads, you name it. And that's the big thing I think about using a good, and I use the generic term firewall but Fortinet goes beyond just a firewall. It's a usability protection tool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
you can block incoming and outgoing, but we still haven't figured out how to taser stupid users. We're working on that.
And east-west, I think that's another really key component of modern security is, and we've seen an actual entire industry segment of just internal segmentation. So, my sort of old time speech is that, 20 years ago or 10 years ago even, it was just about connecting all these things. It was just about getting them to talk to one another. That was the big challenge, right? Let's install the plumbing. Now we went, well, okay, great. Now that's actually not that hard, not to trivialize the work of the network folks, but that's fairly well done. It's fairly well known. As we've evolved and as the things have sped up and technology's brought us to, that's table stakes. Now we need to talk about how we isolate these things and how we actually look. We were happy to get all these servers 10 gig connected. Oh, now all these servers are 10 gig connected. So having the ability to do segmentation, isolation, and then granular policy and granular security between that east-west traffic, right? Protect from that user you're talking about, Tim. That's, that an innocent mistake, a typo. I mean, that's what takes down a lot of networks, just aside from malicious behavior. Protecting folks from themselves.
Yeah, most definitely. So, sorry, I was just going to say, so one other thing I wanted to point out too, we've talked about the inline security here, but there is also out-of-band security. And so if people haven't heard some of those terms, inline and out-of-band is really from a tools perspective. So inline, we were just talking about with Fortinet, where you place it inline in the flow of data traffic. The data goes through the tool before it continues on down the network. But there's also out-of-band, which is where data from a tap or span port is sent over to a packet broker. So the tap or the span is inline, but the packet broker and then the tools and IDS, DLP, whatever is out of band. It's not in that flow of traffic. Well, that's where you can use the packet broker along with your total holistic visibility architecture to go and help that out. So like one of the problems, especially like that will be coming up with ACI architectures and running at 40 gigs and so forth, there's a lot of duplicate packets running around on there. So you can use the packet broker to deduplicate the data before you then go feed that onto a DLP. So that can reduce the number of DLPs and IDSs and so forth, or even the amount of traffic, the amount of traffic you want to inspect and so forth. So wanted to point that out, that there's this two sides of this, inline and out of band as well.
Yeah.
And,
Worth
and don't
noting, we
ever-
do that.
Yeah,
sorry,
and
go
don't
ahead,
ever assume that duplicate packets are crap. They're caused by span ports. They're caused by duplicate route paths and a whole number of other things. So if you think you got duplicate packets, first make sure that they're being caused by another device and not actually happening in your network. Because if you've got a duplicate path, you got to get rid of that because it'll waste your application time.
Yeah, I was going to say we we do that actually at Fortinet. So we can install our platforms out of line, in sort of
Exactly.
that traditional IDS model, and there is still value there. We've just seen a tremendous shift in the other direction, right? Where people have said, we want to be in line, we want to see everything, and in a lot of cases there are still the application where they can't, right? We talk to big media companies. Imagery companies, people that are taking just tremendous amounts of data and saying, look, we know we can't scan all of this real time inline. Then we start talking about the more creative solutions.
Yeah, one of the use cases I've seen there is a university that was using the IDS to go and inspect traffic out of band as well. And that's one of the great things about Fortinet. I love these guys. You can use their product inline, out of band, wherever you need it. It fits into the network. And so it's a fan. And that's where the rubber meets the road, is where these security tools actually go and inspect the data. What I've been trying to get across here, and the other guys have too, is use a packet broker, use a visibility architecture, combine it with your security architecture, and you're going to get the maximum value.
Yeah. Yeah, and back to your poor man's high availability. I think I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of that design. We do a lot to do that sort of high availability built in, sort of the all-in-one, system or tool that shows up where we can install and cable them together. And for a lot of people, that's the right choice. I've always been. I've sort of grew up in the networking world, which I'm guessing all of us have. But that to me has been a tremendous way to go in and say, look, we can actually scale, and we can make a really affordable version of high availability.
Yeah, I think just a comment is that I think ultimately the difference between inline and out of band is really whether or not you consider your tool as a network element, right? And it used to be that was a really religious question, is that if you put it in the network, that's network element, and so you better not do that. I think that the change, if I may, is really network is not of any value if it's not secure. What's the point of having a network when it has no visibility and it's not secure and it's all that? So I think people start to understand that, and they start to take it as a less religious issue now, and just say, okay, fine, just do what you have to do, and if it's inline, if it's out of band, just get the job done.
Yep.
Yeah, most definitely. It's all about the flexibility, because there's different attitudes on security and different techniques that people want to emphasize. So you need an architecture, or you need equipment that's flexible to go into your architecture, and that's what you can get with various security tools like we've been talking about, and packet brokers and so forth. You take them and you meld the visibility architecture and the security architecture together and get that maximum inspection of data, but then also resilience. Because, as we've seen, breaches happen, but how does your network respond to it? How fast does it recover? How fast can you get up and be protecting again? So it's not just, we have to keep everything out. Realistically, we know that probably not going to happen, but you need to be able to recover as fast as possible too, and keep as much out as you can.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be a dichotomy also. You've got these huge networks, you got these small networks, and then you got the guys kind of in the middle. That's a huge span, by the way, but we see the big guys, AT&T and Yahoo and all of them getting hacked. A lot of them just believe they couldn't be hacked. They were too big and too tough. But we're seeing a huge investment now in that mid-market, where people are trying to develop networks that are manageable, have visibility, but it's still confusing. People call me the tap preacher because I just don't believe in any other way of getting access. And all the time I get that question, well, span port will work fine. Okay, that's... if you believe that, that's your church. That's not real, but that's fine. But it is getting to be a very difficult situation. A lot of the legacy companies are refusing to admit. Of course, now with the new European standard, we're going to see a lot of change in the basic fundamentals of security protection. I would also start, of course, with users, but I'm not that. Yeah. In charge of that.
So gentlemen, we have a few more minutes before we close the show. If we try to keep this within the 30-minute show, but I wonder if we can go back to this idea of the poor man's high availability. And if I understand it right, that's sort of the consistent with what we've been talking about, which is focus on the customer. Don't take this as a religious question or inline out of band, right? So Keith, why don't you start? What exactly is the poor man's high availability?
Okay, well, I'll actually start before that. So high availability is where you've got an N plus N set of tools and packet brokers and so forth. So you've got, if you need one packet broker to feed 4 tools, N plus N or high availability, you're going to have 2 packet brokers and you're going to have 8 tools, and you're going to have 1 set working, 1 set in failover. But if you don't need that second packet broker, that second 4 tools, or I should say not if you don't need them, but if you want to control cost, instead of complete double duplication of it, you could put in the 1 or 2 packet brokers, but you could put in 5 tools or 6 tools, and you basically connect those tools up to the packet broker as part of a group. And it's a load sharing group that goes in there. So the packet broker will then take, let's just say it's 10 gigs. It will take the 10 gigs of traffic and fan it across the 5 tools and give them 2 gigs each. Well, if one of the tools goes down, it can then redirect the load, that same 10 gigs, across the 4 tools, so they get 2.5 gigs each, and so forth. Maybe if it goes, that one goes down, it can give them 3.3 gigs across the 3 remaining tools. But you have this load balancing capability that will spread the load across the remaining tools, and then when the tool comes back, or tools that have failed, it'll redistribute the load back, and you'll drop down to that 2 gig scenario again. So what that does is, like I said, if you've got 5 tools, it saves you the cost of 3 tools, which can save you some money. But also, it allows you to be more flexible. Maybe you've got some tools in some different geographic locations and things like this. You can spread it across the network a little bit. It just gives you more flexibility to do what you need it to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Back in the days, Keith, when Tim has more hair than you do, he might have been the first guy to put the sniffer on the shopping cart, and that was the poor man's high availability, right, Tim?
Well, the first sniffer I built back in '76 was a WAN analyzer, and we didn't have LAN, of course.
That's 1976, not 1776.
No, yeah.
Just to be clear, that's good.
In 1976, we were doing semaphore.
Built it on a musket.
Yeah, and it's amazing where it's come from. That, we thought we were when we Network General started, and we had the first, and we had the ArcNet, and then we had Token Ring, and we had a whole bunch of other analyzers. But when we finally started in the Ethernet world, the real Ethernet world, we thought, oh my gosh, 10 megabits per second, that's like lightning, because we were used to 600 baud, 300 baud,
Yeah.
It's not going to slow down either.
Yeah, it was like lightning. And of course, we still have one problem, though, and this is helpful with some of the stuff you're talking about, is we still have WANs. Mm-hmm. And WANs have not developed as fast as LANs have. The WAN technology has kind of stalled.
Yeah.
So getting your data on a WAN is a sacrosanct event. You've got to really make sure you only put the right data out there, and that you're controlling it. So this gives you all that visibility.
Mm-hmm. Hey, John. So just follow up with what Keith was talking about. So tell us of your perspective of the poor man's high availability, right? I mean, on one hand, you say, well, I sell less tools, but that's not the right way to look at it.
Right. No, we're here. I mean, and really, that's been, I've been in the industry long enough that it's not about wedging in some sort of product. It's about the right solution. Mm-hmm. And I call it the cost-effective way of scaling, right? That look, I'll put the sales spin on it, but it's the cost-effective way to. We've known this for networks for a while, which is, look, if we want to, this came about in the early days of how do we get through, a switch or a router that has a bottleneck. Well, you just put them in horizontal availability and you spray across them, and really that's the same model or the same concept we're taking to the idea of security in the right situations. It can be the right model where you say, look, let's peel off either some of the data or all of the data and spray it across different inspection models. So, I totally agree. I think it's a great thing to set up. We tend to build pretty large appliances. So in a lot of cases, I think Tim was mentioning that mid-enterprise space, which is growing. They don't need to even do that, but there are also some surprising new customers some surprising new applications that turn, overnight they explode into, capacities that they do need a more, creative solution. And yeah, I think I like people to be open to that idea versus I want to open the packaging, plug in a cable, and be done. Well, for some that works, and as you grow and become complex, you have to be creative. And I think
Well, so, sorry, one other thing I wanted to jump in and say too is, in some of the customers I've talked to, they actually like that load balancing approach better with the tools because, they get into this, well, if I've got to do full redundancy, there's this huge cost. So I'll just buy 4. I'm not going to buy the other 4, or that's too complex and stuff. But when they start talking the load balancing, well, okay, well, maybe we don't need to buy an extra 4 for it. Maybe we buy 1 or 2 or whatever. So it actually ends up where they're buying what they need. So that's a win for them. And then for the tool vendors, they're actually buying more than they might have otherwise because they may have stopped at the 4 because they didn't want to deal with complexity or that higher cost. But now they've added an extra 1 or 2. So it really is, in my mind, a win-win. And I wanted to make sure that comes across because it makes everybody happy that you're getting what you need and you're doing what you need to do. And so the vendors are going to love that. The customers are going to love that. It's really a good win-win for everybody.
Mhm.
yeah.
And
It
it looks
allows
good on your resume. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, the only last thing I'll say is it does allow for, as we all know, I mean, there are generations of platforms. And someone who deploys, an HA pair of a generation of platform, well, when they get to 10% greater than what that platform can do, it's hard to then rip out and say, or update that one.
Exactly.
In this model of scale, it's easy to say, look, there's a new generation of this platform. I can now just put it in this load balance pool or this, this pool, which that's another reason I'm a big fan.
And I'm also a big fan from the educational standpoint and from your resume standpoint. It is not good to put on your resume that I worked for a company and I didn't do what I was supposed to do and it got hacked. Okay?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if you're a person that wants to learn, and you should be if you're in this environment, having that access, having that visibility, and beginning to understand the true dynamics of what your network is doing, or is not doing, probably either way, or what it shouldn't be doing. There we go. Add that in there. It's a huge learning experience to have this visibility, this access, and that looks good on your resume.
So maybe we should try to close the show today. In addition to closing the series, so using what Tim said, I think what Keith had been doing is really presenting this spectrum of solutions with different vendors in the middle. And if I may, I would say on one end is the packet, right? That's your network. And maybe, using Tim's terminology, on the other hand is your career. Okay. Because if you screw up, it's hard to take that away from it's not to say I work for company X and X and they lost $1 billion valuation because of me.
There you go.
That's not good. But anyway, jokes aside, I think that's that what we're trying to do is to present that spectrum of solutions with different vendors. You can describe the partnerships between these vendors. You can say, well, each is the best of breed, or you can also do it by saying, well, each specializes in something. So therefore, there's an economy of scale. But the point is that we're trying to introduce this concept of visibility by talking about hardware, like the packet brokers, like the tabs and so forth. We've done all that. And we try to explain the importance of that by talking about the tools that attach to them. And in the end, what we're trying to do is to explain to our viewers, who are the guys who are taking care of the network, why you need all that, right? So I really want to thank you, Keith, for taking the effort.
No problem.
I hope people get some benefit out of this.
Yeah, if there's one takeaway I'd leave them with, it's all about getting the right data to the right tool at the right time. That's
Correct.
what you need to do. And so you just need to look at everything in your network and then you can make it happen.
Well, you can't drink from a fire hose, but if you
Exactly.
split it off to 10 or 15 small hoses, you can drink from it and so can everybody else. But it is if you don't know what your network is doing, then don't be surprised when it's hacked. I mean, look, here we are, 2017. Mitnick did the first hack attack in 1979 in the DEC computer using a dial-up modem, audio modem. So, what have we learned? Hackers are going to be here, but we've got to be the ones that know how to close the door. We got to know also what we can let in and out. Basic security stuff. And I'd love to have you guys back anytime, either separately or together, because this is important. People have got to start building this foundation.
Yeah, yeah. So let me finish by thanking John once again. So John, it's really great that you finally get to meet Tim. So,
yeah, look at this. After
I think Tim, I think it's because Tim. I think. Look, I don't mean to be cruel. I think Tim aged faster than you, so that confuses Tim when he sees you and says, "No, this is the guy that I've been working for decades. He can't be looking like this."
That's right. When I saw him, I said, "This can't be the guy I worked with."
It's just a young kid.
I appreciate
This
it.
guy's got hair, damn it.
There you go.
Just move this around.
We really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us your perspective on
You bet.
on the network and the security and all that. And once again, thank you, Keith, for doing what you do. And so I'm going to put up our sponsor slide again. And Tim, why don't you kind of close the show by telling us who Ixia is and why we like them so much?
Well, Ixia, I go way back with Ixia back in the old days with Errol. I think he's a wonderful guy. I know what we're talking about, visibility product line back when it was a newie. Emmy and the whole team are good friends. John Jacobs and I are old friends, but we just didn't know it. Ixia is a company that has a bunch of different facets, but the part that I love the most is the visibility part. The packet broker that Anui designed that became Ixia is the best, in my humble opinion, in the industry. Most versatile, most capable, and then you add that to having a good security system and visibility. You can't go wrong with good visibility and good protection, ever. And so, and now that I'm looking forward to working with the new company and Keysight Technologies, which is a wonderful company. And maybe I'll get a new oscilloscope, Keith.
So if you're interested, if any one of you out there are interested to learn more about Ixia and the product line, their website is ixiacom.com. And so with that, I'd like to close the show. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks to all.
Thank you.